And we're on.
Welcome to the Tsorenity Now podcast, sponsored as always by the SOAR Group. I'm your host, Josh Malmovic. I'm honored to be joined by the three founding members of the SOAR Group today. We're going to go through and meet them and learn about the SOAR Group and why we're going to have a Tsorenity Now podcast.
Thank you.
So first and foremost, Ryan.
Ryan Molinaro.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I didn't want to make it sound too funny.
Yeah, that's okay.
Molinaro it is. He's the CEO of the SOAR Group and one of the founding members.
Indeed.
Very nice to have you here with me
Oh,
today.
I'm happy to be here. This is fun.
It's a lot of fun. And right, who's this guy right next to you here?
Garrett Laudenbach. I'm co-founder and head of client operations.
Garrett. It's a workhorse, that guy.
Yeah. I'm
It's
calling
true.
the professor.
The professor.
Professor.
Garrett Laudenbach. And then James Chang,
Yep, that's my name.
the president, as we've been referring to him as El Presidente, James Chang. We're going to make him comfortable with that title, no matter what we do.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable right now.
All right. Well, hey, we got through that. We'll probably learn more as we go into deeper dive with each of these guys. But we're going to do a little kind of 10,000 foot view of why you're here. So Ryan, tell me a little bit about what got you to today.
Yeah. It was a journey that started, honestly, I'd say it started many years ago. I've known Garrett for about 12 years, James just a little under that. Garrett and I, we realized we liked working together pretty quickly, actually. And we've been known to, or, you know, our colleagues have said, oh, you finish each other's sentences. And it made it really easy when you're doing projects together because he's good at what I wasn't good at. I was good at what he wasn't. And we were a much better team. So I think we started realizing really quickly that you're better as a team than, you know, together you go far. Right? That's something.
That's very well said.
Yep.
Yeah. And so when you go,
Oh my goodness.
He's going to be okay.
It's gonna make.
Uh-oh.
I hope that's not cold.
macadamia nut. I've had my friend from China for a couple of days, and since they've been here, I've been coughing.
Is that how we're starting out the podcast? This is why I'm very. If you guys don't know, James Chang is Asian.
Yeah.
Okay. If you
Thanks,
didn't
James.
know that.
Yeah.
That's
Chang?
what we're starting with.
Chang is?
Yeah, why not? Yeah. We
We
can always start over.
But we're not.
We're not going to.
We're not going to. This is.
Anyhow, Garrett and I, we knew we needed to be a group, right? Working together. And he brought it up to me a number of years ago, and we just had projects, and we were working in, you know, big corporations, and there was plenty of work to do. And we both knew the most important thing was the people. And as cliche as that can be in today's world, you hear that often, but like, you know, it's like, what does that mean? And it's not simple.
No, it's not.
It's not.
And the higher you go, the more you're tending to your every person there, your people issues. And they're not always issues, but everybody's got stuff. They come to work with stuff. So can't be ignored. We knew that. He brought it up. I said, we got too much stuff. And then some things started. And at first, I didn't want to do it. And then it was like, no, we can't do it. And, oh, this isn't good. We started entering a space where it was, well, this is going to be our path.
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaving it really vague here, and
That's
probably a little too vague, but
No, I think Veg's good. And after we get through like getting to know you guys a little bit, we can talk about some, you know, the success you had
Yeah.
in talking about people. I think that's a good idea.
yeah.
Right.
So, you know, summing it up a bit quicker, how we all got together, we started talking about it. And one Friday I heard from James. I hadn't heard from him in a number of years. He was in China. And I said, James, let's catch up. He's like, we need to. And I'm like, all right, Sunday. He's like, yeah, right, Sunday. I'm like, all right. And, you know, when someone's halfway across the world, it's always not easy to, but the times worked out. I said, James, we're thinking about starting a business. And he goes, I'm in. And he said, I'll work for free. And I said, okay. Noted.
I don't remember saying working for free.
I remember
that
that
was definitely
specifically.
not come out of my words.
Specifically,
No.
him saying I'll work for free. And so I'm like, well, that makes it easy, right? We don't have to even give you money.
That's why I haven't been paid yet.
Yeah. And so from there, I went to Garrett on Monday and I said, hey, I know we're talking about doing this, but James, you don't know him real well, but you know me, you trust me. I think you do. And he said, no, I absolutely do. And, let's talk. So the three of us talked and we said, let's do this. And then it was burn the ships from that moving forward.
Yep.
So,
I mean, it's the American dream, right? You come up with an idea, the stars align,
yeah.
and you guys are going all in.
Yep.
Yeah, and you also realize that it takes action, right? And each one of us had a different piece that we brought to the table. I mean, how it comes to is, like I said, together you go far. If this was me alone, I wouldn't be here.
Right.
It's just fact.
It's
I know it. There's a lot of stuff I'm good at. I can disciplined in many ways. Wouldn't happen, right?
It's good to know that. Yeah. It's good to know your
for-
shortcomings, and it's good to know and realize that you do need help. It takes a team.
Absolutely. And if somebody says, if you got a boss that is know-it-all, we all know what that's like. They're
worst.
not.
Yeah. They don't even know what they don't know.
They're not.
Yeah. Well, it's very nice to hear a little bit about your background and have you here, and hopefully that macadamia nut goes away.
Yeah, I think I'm good now, but there's a lot of gaps in that. But I think over the next few years we'll be able to get all of them.
Well, and we're going to do a deeper dive and do one-on-one interviews with each of you to get more of that information. So
Cool.
It'll be great. Garrett, how's it going?
It's going well.
Tell us
Happy
about
to be
Garrett.
here.
I'm glad you're here. Very happy to be with you all as well.
In person. It's good. Obviously, my story and Ryan's story parallel each other. But I think to even go back a little further, perhaps, I would say my whole life I've been fascinated by the concept of leadership. And for a large part of that time, I think I had a erroneous view of it, right? And there was obviously a desire to always help people, but it wasn't until I started working, Ryan hired me. I was working down in the Port of Los Angeles. I was 21, managing longshoremen who were, 30 years my senior in age and experience, and not afraid to remind me of that fact.
That can be fun all the time.
Oh, it was good.
Yeah.
It was.
He left out. He looked like he was 12.
Yeah.
He kind of does now, but anyway.
Anyway, things
fine.
don't change. But the incredible thing, though, is how in those situations that are difficult, right? Managing someone when you're a new manager who's infinitely more experienced than you, how you have the opportunity to build relationships. And I think for me, that's when I saw the power of relationships and leadership. And when you build those relationships with people and you trust them and they trust you, they start to let you into aspects of your life that you ordinarily wouldn't be privy to in a professional relationship. And you're able to do a lot of good, right? They're able to help you transform and you're able to help them transform. And I think for me, when I started to see that, I realized my previous thoughts on leadership were wrong, right? And although it's common to say like servant leadership, in practicality, sometimes it's more difficult, right? And you kind of have to start to have that door open to you. So I think that's what ignited the passion for me. And, being partners with Ryan and James and being with people who share that philosophy, I think is very encouraging. So that's why I'm excited about it. And that's what I want to do is I think, Ryan made a comment, it's cliche now almost, or it's often talked about, but you can go on LinkedIn and you can find 15 inspirational quotes on leadership. But to find somebody who's actually applying it in the workplace is oftentimes a very, very different thing, right?
Yeah.
It's every workplace I've been in, it's been very sparse. And so I think there's a genuine need. And I think people, when they examine the work environment and just a large portion of their lives, they see, hey, this is something that I need, that I would want to impact as well.
You know, and I when you say inspirational quotes, I always think about The Office, right? And how Michael Scott would have all those inspirational posters on the wall.
Right.
And you couldn't even spell leadership, right? And I kind of find out that in a lot of places where they have a bunch of those inspirational quotes, there's no inspiration.
It just becomes a white noise.
It's like we just put a poster up and that covers it.
Right.
Yeah. Is it just going to be absorbed?
Right.
It's on the wall.
Osmosis.
They'll absorb that.
Yeah, you're correct.
Well, now you can see where Garrett comes in different than me. Just drop some truth nuggets on us.
I mean, the professor is in. Yeah. So there we go.
Yeah.
Garrett, awesome.
Get a beer.
He's kept me on the tracks here a few times.
I mean, I can see that. Mr. Chang, how you doing?
Sir.
Sir. I'm a host of a podcast. Who am I, sir?
Sir.
You are James Chang, president of the SOAR Group. Tell me how you got here.
Or West Pointer.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. to
Ring
hear.
knocker.
We should probably talk about that.
How I got here was knowing Ryan and Garrett. I think they were looking for the minority share, and so they decided to bring myself in and say, hey, we don't want to be just a homogeneous kind of ethnic group. And so that's why the diversity part, just make sure we get,
Here we go.
we going down the rabbit
All right,
hole.
we'll see you guys later.
Okay, thanks, guys. That was the
Everybody just
episode.
left off.
I got an audience out there. I got my woke crowd out there. Woke, woke.
We might actually have to delete that.
Probably.
So you might want to start over.
We have the beep beep.
There
we
press
go.
the button. You just, anyways, okay. How did I get here? Well, Ryan, like Ryan said, is that we knew each other over 10 years ago from working out, doing CrossFit. I think there was a mutual respect. I think we were one of the older people in the crowd, but still killing it. I think.
Yeah, I mean, we
Right?
weren't that old. Compared to the coaches, we were older, but
It's in your
still
early 30s?
Early 30s.
30.
Yeah,
30.
exactly.
Yeah, 30.
We're still killing it though, getting the top scores. We would always, I would come in the mornings. I think Ryan came in the afternoon, so we'd always look at the whiteboard and see who.
So I just would look for James's name, and I said, I'm going to beat that number
That's right.
every time.
I think what happens through like kind of that physical competition though is there's mutual respect, and so I think that's what we just we would have a mutual respect, and I think we worked out throughout the years, and then I moved to China, and I was in China for about 3 or 4 years, and because of COVID, I was actually not in China. I was actually I somehow got to Taiwan after I just recently got married, and called up Ryan. I was like, hey, I got to catch up with this guy. I just felt the need to talk to him, and he was shared that idea, like, I'm going to start a business on leadership, and I felt like leadership was something that I felt was meaningful and something that the world needed, not just in the United States, but also what I saw in China. And I think that this is something that I can get behind and put my full force into it. Like leadership, culture change, people talk about it, but I think actually doing it and coaching people how to do it is the key to really changing the impetus to starting to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically what it is. We had a shared vision of and trust in our relationship, and we had a shared vision of what we wanted to do.
That's awesome. I mean, I know in one of the first conversations we ever had as a group, which seems like years ago, but like one of the first conversations, one thing that really kind of sparked my interest was what the actual vision of the SOAR group is. I mean, we talk about leadership, we talk about these robust ideas, or putting inspirational quotes on the wall, but let's go a little bit deeper into what it is, like the actual mission of the SOAR group as we move forward, and what leadership really means to you guys.
Well, I think we'll probably answer that as a group.
I would hope so.
Yeah. Well, everybody will add a piece, and we're all in line.
Yeah.
We're all in alignment. We all just, different things come to us at different times. But, where it comes in like a very simple form is, I saw the difference of what you can do in leading managers to manage well, of the effect that has on every person there. And to the one who's cleaning the facility. Every person. There isn't a person that gets left out when the place is thriving, when people are managing well. I always said, early in my career, I was given a promotion, and I didn't know really why. It felt right.
You like the pay raise?
Yeah, I mean,
like
promotion,
awesome.
great. Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what I was good at. Some folks in HR would ask me, like, what are you good at, Ryan? And I'd say, I'm people. And it was never an acceptable answer, and I never understood that. And I said, I don't know what to tell you. I can...
Wait, it wasn't an acceptable answer?
Yeah, and it was never acceptable.
And you're talking to HR, which is human resources?
Yeah.
And people, that's it. That's a very
They
interesting...
wanted you to give negotiation. They wanted you to give, some
Right.
type of skill, specific,
Interesting.
academic skill, would you say? Anyhow, I felt like you're given the keys and you're never taught how to drive.
Fair point.
And that's what it comes down to on just a basic level is, how do you drive? And a lot of what we're looking at is we've applied different philosophies over the last 12 years, and all three of us in different capacities, but from reading, listening, and applying different ways. And there's some great material out there. A lot of this stuff we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Some of it was what the three of us have had discussions about is it's too far one way or it's a little not enough of this. And so one of the things we're doing is we're trying to take the best of the best.
Yeah.
Right, doing the grunt work for everybody.
Yeah, and
and,
then
and coming up with a roadmap that gets to
Yeah.
leadership instead of having to go down all these different roads.
and the mission is how do we affect more than just one organization? How do we affect the lives of every person that works at an organization in more than just one?
Well, and another thing that you guys said when we first started talking too, it's not only how you affect them as an organization, it's how you affect them when they go home.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because there's the thought that they probably have children, right?
Yeah.
And those children need leadership, and those could be the future leaders of tomorrow if this is an ongoing, it's kind of like snowball, right? Like,
Right.
so if you put these really good values into the workplace, they take that home with them.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop just because they clock out.
Yeah. Well, and some of it's just a matter of they're treated well. When
Right.
you're treated well in the workplace, people go home and they're just more pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When they meet their wife or their husband, they're just more pleasant, and they're like, "How was work?" And it was like, "Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
It was okay."
They probably have energy to like go home and make food and
Well-
hang out and have a social life and have something outside of work when they're happy at work too.
You know what I saw early was how much time people would talk, or how much time people would spend talking about management, and even where they had a hand in it too. Let's not forget we all have a hand in it. I'm talking. I've seen hours of time just because of how someone in management was acting, and they weren't wrong.
Yeah.
And
No,
it was,
not at all.
And the people weren't wrong.
Right.
The manager was. Or the leader, whoever it was, and the higher up, the worse it was. And, how frequently people would just spend time. And I'm like, hey, if we can let's just not worry about that. If that's just, that's something we don't have to talk about. Holy moly, work just starts. I mean, people are just knocking it out of the park, and then, they're laughing.
Yeah.
They're having fun. Who knew?
Yeah, stop talking about the bad guy and let's just get to work and focus on each other and the team.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
Weird.
some of that takes courage because you have to
Right.
have a leader that has courage to remove the bad guy too.
A couple of things that Ryan brought up that I was thinking, like the promotion part. The people that usually get promoted are like that, let's say, salesperson. But that doesn't mean just because they know how to sell doesn't necessarily mean they know how to manage or
yeah.
be a leader.
I think
So
that's
you always
classic.
have that's the classic example is that the Michael Jordan or the Phil Jackson Chicago Bulls. Michael Jordan, fantastic player, as a player coach, questionable with the Charlotte Hornets, right?
Right.
So the other part that Ryan brought up, I think that's applicable is can you teach leadership? Is it a natural gifting or is this something that's learned?
Yeah.
And I could talk about personally for me, like I went to West Point, but one of my recommendations to West Point, my gymnastics coach said that James is not a natural leader. And so that could have hurt me, but I think West Point was predicated on the point of they build leaders of character, and it was a process for me. But I think I came out okay. I'm here. I'm here somehow. So.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes when somebody says that to you, right, that helps push you to find out why it is that they think you're not a natural leader. And then it, I think people that have like charisma or have, a natural knack for people to follow them, probably take shortcuts and probably don't do the work. Whereas somebody that maybe doesn't have the gift will work harder and become a much better manager and a much better leader.
Yeah. And I would say just looking at the three of us, right? James and I are probably more naturally introverted, less outgoing on our own. And Ryan, you're an extrovert.
Garrett, speak for yourself.
Yeah, I know.
Don't bring me into this.
Sorry. Scripting you in with me. But
It's too late.
yeah, and that's, I think, when we talk about a piece of SOAR, right? Part of the mission is we all acknowledge that in life you're going to come across an obstacle. And to look at the obstacle and to see that, hey, this is something that's going to cause growth and make me better is it's an important mindset to have. So as a more introverted person who naturally wouldn't want to go out with people, I still have to overcome that if I'm going to be a successful leader. It doesn't mean I can't be a successful leader. I can. And I think there's things about, your personality that you would say can be challenging and you've had to overcome as well. So I think that's the beauty of leadership is as long as people are willing, as long as we're willing to look at ourselves first and lead ourselves, then other people will likely start to begin to follow us.
There he goes again.
There he goes again. The professor just comes out of nowhere. That's great. It's true.
He's right.
No, it's 100% accurate. I think it's great. Well, we're talking about how we got here. We're talking about like the mission of SOAR Group. But so what is SOAR? Like, where do we come up with the name? Where do we come up with like the foundations of here? That was a pun, by the way. The foundations.
That's right.
Not too much.
That was our goal. Is we said, we don't want to name after one of us or anything like that because we wanted to go beyond us. That was number one, right? We wanted to go beyond us, and then we started trying on a lot of different names. I mean, I think we went through close to 30 different names.
At least.
I mean, we would try it and we would sit with it and, no, guys, I don't think that's it. It doesn't feel right. And we came across the word SOAR when we were going through a lot of material and saying, it's that foundation that creates, the building blocks for everything else. And so rock has been part of it. So we started looking at, solid rock, foundation on solid rock. And I started looking up different Greek and Hebrew words, and then I saw SOAR, and I was like, it's interesting. And we started saying to soar initially because that's a pronunciation variation of it. And then we all kind of locked in on it, and we all said, wow, that seems right.
Yeah.
And part of what it was is we also, part of the imagery, if you will, like of what we were looking for is to, when you're down in something, when you're in the weeds and you're stuck, or whatever you're experiencing, whether you go overreact or you go passive, but how, when you pull out. So we were thinking like pulling out, rising up, rising above, and soaring. Right?
Perfect. Yeah. Perfect.
So SOAR, the foundation of it is rock of God.
Right.
And for us, that's fully in line with our values and our principles, and it was a natural fit.
And we were talking earlier, just having a fun discussion as we were getting set up and getting ready to do this, and we were talking about like if you build a house on a shoddy foundation, what happens? So, I mean, I think it's very appropriate, like how SOAR came to be.
I think another part about SOAR too, besides foundation, I've heard it also translated as flint or spark.
Yeah.
So there's something about initiating something new, a fire for other people that we want to be part of. Not just a foundation, but we want to initiate something. So That's how I see SOAR as well. It's just not just, like when you think of rock, it's just standing still, but able to do something, move forward.
Yeah, start a fire, start passion, ignite the passion of people wanting to, learn leadership and to, be able to grow better people, like better workers, better whatever. You can put whatever at the end of that, but
it's contagious.
Right.
So
It's totally
once the
contagious.
spark is lit in somebody, they might not stay at that company forever, but the next company they go to, they're going to bring the spark there, and it's going to be this replicating effect.
Well, so let's talk about that a little bit. So let's talk about when you guys were at another company, when you guys were working together, and you implemented some of the practices that you are ultimately going to be using going forward. As everything's always changing, but some of the founding principles. Talk about that success that you had. We had poor work conditions. Like people were mad all the time, right? Productivity was down, profitability was way down. So just talk about what you guys did in bringing the leadership to make that happen.
Garrett, you want to start?
Professor should start.
Yeah. So at this point, we'd known each other for quite a few years, and we'd also worked apart as well. So I think we had brought in some different experiences that kind of prepared us for that. And I remember the first day I met the team. So kind of to paint the picture, you were saying, right, poor productivity, actually negative EBITDA, so losing a significant amount of money each year. And came in on the first day. Brian had been there for a few months beforehand.
3-4 months,
yeah. And I looked at everyone and I said, hey, we're going to be doing two things, right? We're going to be focused on building up each other, and through that, there's going to be a natural result, which is going to be more satisfied customers, and we're gonna fix our profitability issue. And one of the words I used to describe it at that time, I kind of warned everyone. I said, hey, this is a weird word to use in business, but the word we're going to think about is love. And if we love what we do and we have a love for one another as coworkers, that is going to be contagious. Yeah. And that is going to start to reverse the trend that we've been on. And, not that telling people, hey, just get along and love each other fixes everything, but it was kind of that mindset that we, I think, brought in, and it worked, right? So within a few months, we were starting to see positive trends
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to that conversation, I'm sitting right there, and I had just spoke to everyone, and then Garrett went. And even me at first, I was like, how are they going to take love?
It's a pretty loaded word.
It's a loaded word.
Yeah. And I'm like, but he's right. He's right. And it was like he's talking about that mindset where you had people that was infighting. Whenever an organization's struggling, there's always infighting. There's
Yes, the he said, she said.
Yep, and just a lot of adversarial relationships. And what starts happening is it takes constant, time working with each person and them to feel cared for, feel loved, and then they start thinking, well, maybe they're not so bad, and maybe I'll try and speak a little nicer to them, and then it just opens the door.
That's an awesome way to put it. Like saying, love what you do, love each other. If you love people, there's a respect factor, and yeah, it's huge. It's awesome. Now you did other things, right? You used some other tactics and other things to maybe make sure people were doing the right things or like fitting into their roles properly.
Correct. Yeah, if you go into that, we
high level,
you had to look at everyone's needs. You start there's like basic needs, and then there's psychological needs, and we started with the basic. And when there's gaps there, you have to start there, because if a basic need isn't getting met, then you're not going to. So we go back to the foundation. So you look at the foundational basic needs. Okay, hey, we have a gap. Where people use the restroom, it's not adequate. Where people eat their food,
right?
So you got to start thinking of like, shelter, food, right? These types of things, when they're not functioning well in a workplace, then you're not going to build. You can't come in bringing certain principles and just throw them on everybody and say these are going to fix it. Just go by these 4 or 7, and we'll be good.
Yeah.
You know, so you start there, you know, and then from there you start introducing certain principles. But I always found that you have to start very small. And, you know, at some point I know we're going to get into habits and things of that nature, but it's the same way. You want to look at it the same way as habits, where you start with very small. Like if you want to put in a new habit, just working out, you know, James Clear has a great book. There's a couple of other really good books on it, but how, you know, a guy wanted to start working out, drive to a gym every day. He only went 5 minutes for, I think it was like a week or 2. And then he went back, and 2 weeks later he said, all right, I'm going to do 10 minutes. And he was getting in his car, driving over there every day. So, and then what it comes down to is you start with that one little piece. So whatever that one thing is, right, you start getting everybody around this one thing. And if it, you know, it's some form of improvement, doesn't have to be, you know, you don't have to go for the gold out the
the
gates.
national championship.
Yeah.
The first one.
Yeah, you're not going to do it.
And one of the things I learned from Ryan was just the importance of taking the time to get to know people. So that I think that one of the main habits that led to success, how do you actually demonstrate to people that you love them, is you know them. So when you're running an organization and you don't know your people, it's tough, right? But if you take the time, you build the habit to meet them, then they feel very different.
Yeah.
Right?
It only reminds me, Ryan, what you're talking about in terms of basic needs, like Maslow's hierarchy of
That's
needs. Were you thinking about that?
Absolutely.
You
We
were
listed
thinking-
them out.
Yeah. So how do you determine those needs? So that's kind of my question, since you guys led this organization. You know.
I went through Marshall Rosenberg's
Yeah.
nonviolent communication, and he goes into the 9 basic needs.
Nice.
Like any of these are missing,
Yeah.
you can't go anywhere. And that's where, if you really want to unpack needs, like go through his material, and you'll start to see, oh, that's why this is so important. I mean, we take little things, we don't place importance around certain things that could be very small but very, very important.
Yeah. Go ahead, Garrett.
I was to say, didn't you recommend
Yeah, he did.
that book to Ryan?
I
But
was-
James
I
was a
was-
part of this.
I was teeing it up. I was teeing it up for myself. I
Yeah.
wanted to acknowledge
Yeah, there
it.
you go,
I
of
was the
course.
one who
Yeah.
introduced
There we
that
go.
thing
Yeah.
for him.
He's been
But no,
left out
it
over
brings up
there.
an interesting point. I remember Garrett saying that one of the first things you did at that company was safety. One of the needs is safety.
Safety.
And you allowed people, like, what did you exactly do there?
I mean, there was a lot of unsafe scenarios, but I think
Oh,
that
So I had to think about it for a second, because there's
it's like
safety is such a
Broad term.
it's such a broad term, and in corporate, you know, it doesn't mean you go hire a safety manager necessarily. Not to say someone doesn't need a safety manager.
Some people do that, though, right?
Some people do, and they're all right. I'm going to cover safety in that way. So no. It's that they need to feel safe. So there's a couple of different layers. So physically, so you have to address that. Is there a physical safety not taking place?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a psychological safety, and that one's much more involved. That takes where, hey, I'm safe to say this to Garrett. I'm safe to say this to Ryan. That is like, that takes rep after rep after rep of us saying, it's okay. Hey, and, you know, you have to read body language, and you see, he's not telling me something now because he's afraid of my reaction. So that's where presence, you have to be in presence. So I say, okay, I can see he doesn't want to tell me something. I'm going to let him know I don't care what the outcome is. Did this happen? I'll just guess. I'll be like, hey, did this happen? Did we not get it done? And it was like, well, yeah, no, boss, we didn't. I'm like, okay, that's okay. And then I just walk away.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait, he didn't
yell at me.
You
He
didn't
didn't
lash out at me.
freak
Didn't
out
give
at
me a
me.
punishment, right? So it allows people safe to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I a lot of times I wouldn't even say anything else about it again, because I knew someone will hold themselves more accountable than I ever could. And if they're not, then, you know, they show a pattern, and then, you know,
And that's different.
It's different.
Yeah.
You know, those people they always kind of rise up in a bad way.
Right. And then you can move them on or
Yeah, you
do
you know,
different things.
There's a lot of different things you can,
So-
different areas. All right, go ahead, Jim.
Was this when you first like got into the company, like allow safety? Like this is where you prove to yourself. Like when somebody new comes in the company, the first thing people are like, okay, who's this
Yep.
jerk off? What is he gonna do?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Who's this?
The,
You
What's
know,
he gonna do?
the new, the new
Yeah,
leader.
I mean that's
The
a
lead
great
manager,
question. Yeah,
right?
so I mean one thing I think I've frustrated a lot of my own superiors in years past because I take some time. Like I really like take time because the problem is you tell someone that in an interview, hey, 30, 60, 90, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
First 6 months, what are you going to do? And it's like, well, I'm going to get to know everyone. You know, I've had a
That's
lot of
huge.
people say that to me, and
Get to know people.
yeah, get to know people, but
Mm.
that's painful. And upper management, senior management, they don't want that. They don't want that time
Well, explain like why is it painful to get to know somebody?
because there's very little results typically.
Right. There you go.
Very little results, and that's your job as a manager, right? You got to produce results, and it takes time because you have to go sit with them, and you're not getting any emails done. Potentially, you're not getting any spreadsheets done. Whatever you have to produce, you're not doing. So production, from a manager standpoint, can be a very slippery slope of losing connection with your team.
Yeah. Pushing people way too hard to get to the result at the cost, of their development or the cost of their, happiness or anything can be very detrimental. It might be a short-term gain, right?
Yeah.
You can just keep throwing more wood on the fire.
Oh, you can get short term all day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but long-term, you're going to start falling off.
Yeah, they're gone.
And there's a couple points you brought up that I think kind of ring true too, is like many different companies you've been around or big, small, doesn't matter. Like they have these words like open door policy,
Yeah,
right?
we can talk about that.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah,
but
we can
if
have a
you're saying
podcast on
safety,
that.
We will, for sure. But like with the safety thing, like the open door policy was in place so that way you could come in and say basically anything in a safe environment.
Mhm.
And I think that's one thing you implemented
Yeah.
quite quickly.
And I'm just going to little drop. You do put rules around how an open door policy works, but we won't go there.
I know, but you know what I mean. Right.
It's important though.
It is.
In this context,
have
though,
it.
the burden was not on the employees to come and talk to Ryan or myself, right? It was we go out and we engage them, and I think that's the difference, right? As
So you guys initiated.
Yeah,
the-
there will always be people who respect positions of authority,
Mhm.
and so someone like myself, I might not naturally feel comfortable talking to you as the president, right? And so if you don't engage me, I will never engage you, and I might have a wealth of information that I want to share.
Yeah, I would say also like, personality types really affect interaction. So just the example you just gave, like I'm a natural introvert. So I won't say anything until somebody kind of initiates something towards me. Whereas obviously Ryan and Josh are extroverts.
Right.
And so they can talk and talk and talk and talk. And they'll initiate it, which makes them fantastic people, out in front and relationship building. But I'm probably, if I wasn't put in a position of responsibility, I'd be okay just sitting there doing my work and getting things done.
Yeah. I mean, that you bring up a good point too, because that's also where, I could also get over my ski tips, right? And then Gary'd be like, hey man, we don't want to do that. I'm like, all right, thanks.
Get over your
Speaking
ski
of
tips.
safety.
Wait,
Well, that's a skiing term. Sorry
Okay.
if you don't know that.
Just go over your ski tips.
Yeah,
So
you
is
go over
it-
your ski tips, you're tumbling.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because you're going too hard or going too difficult?
Or just doing too much, right?
Okay.
Taking on too much,
Yeah.
pushing too far.
Yeah, or just moving a little too fast. Maybe, committing to too much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we want to go in this direction now, but I do feel it's the responsibility of the leader to take the commitment, and that takes courage. But you have to be willing to commit, and you have to be willing. This is so. This phrase is so overused in corporate America, in self-improvement right now, on every platform, but that you will stand behind your people. You will take the fall, right? We've heard that in different forms, right? You'll take the responsibility, but like really do it. to where, you know, this was not at the previous company, but one many years ago. I was in a situation where the senior manager I was reporting to, he said, "Who did that?" And I said, "It was me." He's like, "I know it wasn't you." And I go, "It was me." And it drove him nuts because I wouldn't reveal the name of the person on my team that made the mistake.
Because you felt as the leader that whoever made the mistake in your team, you took
I
ultimate
didn't communicate to
responsibility.
him properly. It was
Right.
my fault.
Right.
And you know, quite frankly, it was. I mean, and we can unpack that at a later time. But I didn't, you know, he didn't have proper guidance from me. I didn't follow up. I should have known to follow. I mean, there was a list of things going on, and it was complex. You know, there was 1,000 people operation. It was complex, but you know.
So what do you say to the manager that takes the fall, the responsibility, even though he wasn't physically the one at fault? Like the consequences of that, you know, like most people are afraid to say that it's their fault because there's consequences to every single action and decision, right? And so what do you say to a manager who says it wasn't really his? Yeah, of course, as a manager, you're fully responsible for everything on your teams, but it wasn't you actually doing it. Like, and your boss or the client asks whose fault it is. Are you willing to take the consequences as far as getting fired? You know, when you have a kid, you have a mortgage, you have all these responsibilities, and this job is basically your only source of income. Is that something that you're expecting all leaders to do?
Yeah, that's just a straight yes, and I'll tell you why. Because once you start doing that, all of a sudden the locker room's standing behind you. Mm-hmm. And from a sports terms, if you don't have the locker room, you don't have the game. If you lose the locker room at halftime, especially, you're done. Second half's done. And what starts happening is this gets into, James, your question. It ties directly into that building trust, building safety.
Yep.
Because what happens, you know, you have to make a decision though. If you don't want your people to make decisions, make good decisions on their own without you being there, because one, you can't be there all the time. You know, if you want them to do that, they have to feel safe to do that.
Right.
Then they start building confidence. So you go from safety, now you start gaining into the next levels of strength.
Yeah. Should we pause here?
All right, we're back. Little, life happens moment there. But I think what we were talking about with now I'm going to try to think about it again. Someone refresh my memory.
Just responsibility.
Taking responsibility.
So here's the thing. So one thing
Responsibility.
that to go off that story that Ryan was saying, and it was awesome, is the fact that if you ever one time don't take responsibility for your team, you lose that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like you can do shortcuts and stuff like that, and people take whatever. But if you one time make somebody else the fall guy, and you don't take responsibility for something that you did, you've lost it.
Years.
You're not getting it back.
Yeah.
For a long time.
So I will say something on that. You do have to be aware of your culture. And by culture, I mean country. So, we border two countries here, Mexico and Canada. Very different. And you have to understand in each one of those how, if you break that trust, how that culture looks at it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Same for Europe. Same for China. Whatever it is, everyone has a different. In some cultures, Garrett, we had a guy that worked for us who refused overtime for 6 months because he was mad at somebody. They had a dispute.
So it's just like,
Because if he got
F
it,
you,
the other
I'm
guy
out.
got it, is how it worked.
Yeah.
oh, I got you.
$300 less a week.
He literally took it in the shorts, basically, so that guy had to as well.
Right.
Out of spite.
Out of spite.
It's both spite. So, how far will you have to know that
Right.
about the culture that's working for you. That's why we throw culture around. It's like, yeah, we have a company culture. Yes, all that. But there is country of origin.
That's huge. Yeah, but again, I think if you ever don't take ownership and responsibility, you're going the wrong way. And I don't think it's going to help with future leaders, in my opinion.
And what Ryan just said reminded me of the Army. Like the soldiers, we had to say in the Army, soldiers don't care what you say until they know that you care about them first. So, you have to care about the soldiers. You got to care about the people working, because if you consider them just a tool then that can be thrown away, then why would anybody want to do anything for you?
Yeah, James, there must be a quick exposure in the military, right? Because there can be life or death situations, right? So, like, if you don't look up to a leader in the military, you're not going to last long, right?
Yeah, and there's stories in Vietnam of officers, leaders just being abandoned, shot by their soldiers because they couldn't lead. And so I think Garrett hinted out something like hierarchical leadership. Like you can respect the rank, but when you're in the battlefield, it quickly becomes obvious who's going to be an asset to the group or just a detriment. And so regardless of rank, you'll see that especially with special forces guys. They'll be like, they go by first names for a reason because they're looking at the skill set, not necessarily at the rank, which they still respect, but you have to be able to do what you're doing, be competent in it. And that's how they respect you, if you're competent in your skill set.
And that's why I love some of Jocko's material, right? Because he really takes that battlefield and he brings it into, everyday life, business. He's got some great material.
Well, and something that you just said, like, totally sparked in my head. Like, if you just, think people are tools, or you just, more another cog in the machine, if you will. Like, look what happens. Like there was if you go back in time, I don't know, was it 30 years, 40 years, when, like, companies don't have pensions anymore. They don't care about, like, they don't have investment in their people anymore. Like, they just, like, they're a commodity. And so that's what happens. Like, the mentality and why there's such a failing in leadership and why there's such a failing right now of, all this that we're talking about is because of the fact that people just said, we can just put more logs in the fire and just keep the machine going. And that's where the shortcomings come in.
I have a question about that, though. Do you think that is the reason why companies don't invest in people, and that's why we have this phenomenon? Or is it the sign of the times of modern generation, like millennials and Generation X? I'll give you an example. Like basketball, Michael Jordan, he stayed with the Bulls even at a losing team for his almost his entire career. On the opposite hand, you have LeBron James, who's gone to different teams, but, kind of like that's what most teams, and Kevin Durant, whoever you want to pick, it's not just specifically LeBron James. It's just the sign of the times. So that's my question.
Well, I think you go into the what's in it for me, like, generation kind of gap. But would LeBron James's head work that way if he would have went back in time and it wasn't like you can work for you can go get the highest dollar or whatever, because you stay with this company, you're going to get your gold watch, you're going to have that. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that's talk about culture. That's a real culture issue. Like, it went from, you're going to work your butt off for 30 years at this job, you're going to get your gold watch, and you're going to be taken care of for the rest of your life. Yeah. And that changed. So it's like a chicken egg. There's no way to prove which one caused the other.
I think there's people who like that stability.
Oh, yeah.
Would
absolutely
appreciate a good pension. And the fact that doesn't exist is, not good, right?
Yeah.
And then there's other people who I think like change and like adventure and wouldn't want that. And I would consider myself in the latter category typically. But every time I've left a job, it's been because of leadership. So I think,
Fair enough.
Sometimes people might stay in a job that has a pension, and I've worked with companies that do provide a pension for employees, and there's bad leadership and those guys are stuck, and it's kind of sad, right? Because you've put in so much time that you don't want to leave, but you have a terrible work environment, and then
it's like nowhere to go.
Yeah,
you're
and
stuck.
that reminds me of a quote I read about leadership. It says something like, people join because of vision, but people leave because of leadership.
Yeah.
So I think you're onto something there. But also, there's also people who said that, and I think, I remember a study, don't quote me here, because I don't remember really, but I remember this kind of saying that people who stay in one single company without a promotion, let's say, maybe promotion, they're only getting an increase of 3% or 5% or 6% in pay. But if they leave the company, they actually have a higher jump in salary by leaving. So
Like 10 to 20%.
Yeah, the average person is 3 to 5 years in an organization.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. And the other part of it is I stayed in a company for 13 years, and I felt like if you get complacent in a company, your skills kind of degrade. You're not as marketable to other companies as you get older, your net present value.
Talk about that all the time.
Right. So what is the reason why people would stay on the company is because either some sort of amazing vision, they believe in something cause, but more importantly, who they interact with is the leadership.
Well,
And
I'll
I
challenge you on that. I mean, we're comfort, right? Like we start getting drawn to comfort.
That's true.
And that's another conversation, and we won't go there right now. But
Well, you're absolutely right, though. Some people just, regardless of leadership, they're just used to it, and they're going to stay in the company because they already know exactly how to get by and still make money, and then their focus is on the family then. Maybe they're just making money to support the family.
yeah, and I understand. And everyone has a different story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And
We-
I think that's another great podcast coming up in the future. I have a good
I'm looking
feeling.
forward to that one. I saw the show notes. I liked it.
Good, because I don't know they are.
I've never seen them.
So do you have? I'm sorry, Garrett. You look like you want to say something.
We were talking about stories a lot. We've talked about our stories a little bit, but we haven't talked about your story, Josh. And
It's true.
I think that'd be
Yeah, appropriate time.
Yeah.
Who am I?
Who are
Who-
you?
who is
Who's
Josh?
this guy?
I don't even know who I am.
Yeah.
So
It's like a philosophical question.
I'm Josh, and I'm no, different story. No, so I'm Josh, and I'm part of the SOAR group. I'll say that.
I mean, you're
Everybody
here.
hear that? I'm here. I'm a facilitator, moderator, and hopefully soon enough be managing the development of the sales team and also driving revenue. Crazy. I worked at another company and had a customer of mine who introduced me to Garrett and Ryan and James, and to say we hit it off like right away is an understatement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Like I felt like I've known you guys my whole life
Yeah.
instantaneously. It didn't hurt that Rainier was part of the process, but still, like our conversations have been candid and open, and I'm, very, very happy to be a part of this organization.
For those who don't know, Rainier is the mutual friend.
yeah,
It's not-
sorry,
It's not.
don't worry, he'll be in a podcast.
He'll be on a podcast.
Because speaking of switching lots of jobs, we can go on a whole tangent about recruiting and
Yeah.
and things like that. So we'll get him in on a podcast for sure. But anyway, I'm just very excited to be here. You guys, the vision you have and the things that you want to accomplish, like speak near and dear to my heart. I see it every single day. I work in companies that have all these cliches that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And
the
I think,
inspirational pictures on the wall, the unlimited pay time off.
I think that helped
Those
too.
things.
Is when you hire somebody, you look at somebody. There's a subjective feel, but we also coupled that with data. We use like a software to sell your profile, and I think your profile fit really nicely into what we were lacking, and then one of our weaknesses. So not just your experience, but also like there's the software has said like this is your profile type and what you want to do. And I know for all of us, we were like we need this person on board.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so subjective, but it's true. And like Garrett, why don't you give your little 2 minute spiel on how
it ties right into
people hire
what we were saying
Yeah.
before, right?
Yeah.
When you go into an organization and you don't know your people, you don't know what their needs are. And so if there's a way that you can quickly understand what people's psychological needs are, right? Not just their physical needs for a clean work environment, a safe work environment, but you start to understand their more specific psychological needs, you can actually work to meet them. And you can put them in a position where those needs are going to be naturally met and they're going to come alive, right? And when that happens, you don't have to worry as much about, oh, did I check up and make sure this person's doing their job? They're going to want to do it.
Yeah.
So-
Right.
So that brings up a question to me.
Well,
Ryan, you're about to say something.
I wanted Garrett to go a little further, Garrett.
Okay.
We've talked about this on
How we
how we make
hire.
mistakes.
Yeah. I forget who said it, but you would never go into a budget meeting and just wing it, like off the cuff. I think next year we can do this, and we'll make about that.
It'll work.
You
It's
know,
fine.
The CEO would not be happy with you
No.
if you had that presentation.
I mean, they have horrible commercials now with people having tattoos all over their body to have all the quarterly numbers.
Yeah.
That's how important those budget
Right.
meetings are, to have the information, right?
Exactly.
Correct?
Don't
So,
forget
to your point,
the target.
But then it's like, who's going to actually drive those results? It's the people. And when we go into hire, we kind of take a approach that's not based on facts or data, right? We just kind of feel. And unfortunately, people are not very good. I'm not very good at naturally telling if somebody might be the right fit for a position or not. And, if you've read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers, he wrote a whole book on this. And it's, very relevant to the current environment. But one of the stories he used was the story of judges in New York with arraignments and giving bail or not giving bail to people who are going to be on trial. And the judges, despite all their years of experience, did absolutely terrible at determining if somebody would commit another crime if they were given bail or not. And, some guys from MIT and Harvard wrote a computer program that wasn't terribly complex, but it reduced the amount of people who committed crime on bail by 50%.
Wow.
So,
yeah. Well, it's funny. A lot of big companies, their interview process and the way they determine if somebody fits in a company is very wishy-washy.
yeah.
It's very there's certain questions you can ask out of this section, certain questions
Right.
out of this section, and that determines who you're going to hire.
Yeah.
But there's more to it.
Well,
that's where the data comes in.
And I think as you mature in your career, you start to feel more comfortable interviewing, more comfortable selecting people. But if you're a top level executive, at some point you're not the one in the interview for the frontline person.
You shouldn't be.
Yeah, you shouldn't
hope
be.
But
Yeah.
that's not always the case.
Right.
Yeah, it reminds me of the.
I won't go there.
Reminds me of the movie Moneyball. Like they talk about the guys who were experienced; they weren't just doing it by feel, but you start using data, it can help supplement. I wouldn't say totally rely on the data, but there has to be a supplementation of different areas.
Yeah.
Somebody's experiences, your experience with some type of person, but also then have something coupled with some sort of hard data to let you
Right.
know that person. Right?
Well, that's how you found me.
yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
absolutely.
I mean, let's riff on trust for a second on that. So think about it. If you are the head of an organization and you still, you've grown to a few dozen people and you're still having to interview the frontline person, whatever level that may be, right? Anything 2, 3, 4 steps below the CEO, now you're not trusting the people that work for you that you hired.
And they know that because
They
you're
know
still
that.
doing the interviews.
They
Right.
know it.
And then
Yeah.
it's your CEO's person,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Then
Right.
Then the manager takes no responsibility, no ownership for the hire.
Yeah. I mean, we won't go there, but this is
That's a
where
house of
we enjoy
cards.
this. I mean,
Yeah.
Garrett and I have walked through this. I've
Yeah.
hired people, and then nobody was telling me like, oh yeah, Ryan, we didn't want to tell you he wasn't real good, but we knew you liked him. I'm like, well, it took you 3 years to tell me that.
3 years.
I mean, that was a number of years ago that it happened, but I've learned since then and realized how I have to call myself out, and then how I have to create this environment that says, hey, Ryan, this is kind of your buddy. We're afraid to tell you that he's not really holding his end of the bargain for the team. And then it's like, oh, all right. Hey, now, I'd say in the last, 8 years, I've gotten that down to where it's immediate.
Yeah.
So-
Well, this goes back to that conversation you had earlier where the guy could come in and say, yeah, boss, we dropped the ball. And you're like, okay. And you walk away. It's like you're building that trust and that letting
Yeah.
him know it's okay
Yeah.
if something doesn't go exactly the plan. I still need to know about it, but
Yeah, and then
that's the
if
trust.
it's serious, then we all dive in right away. If it's something that was a mistake that we can all move on from, then we move on.
So here's my question then. What if you find somebody who doesn't live up to their expectations? Like how often do you have to defend and take responsibility for what they do versus, hey, this person, we gotta let them go? Like where's that balance? 'Cause-
When you see the pattern.
okay. So
When
it's not
there's-
the first time.
Yeah, when there's a pattern. I mean, there's a pattern, and when you see there's going to be a little window of just neglect, of no care. But honestly, people around you start telling you.
Yeah.
So if you have that relationship with these people that are working alongside this person, then they start saying, hey, James he's okay.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I
Yeah.
like James. What do you mean he's okay? I like him.
It reminds me of that Simon Sinek question about a lecture about the Navy SEALs. That they kind of like they depend on each other and they'll hold their own. But if somebody's not holding up, they're
And listen, James, sometimes people are wrong. Just they're wrong. And you might have hired somebody for a specific reason because you want a certain thing out of them. But then that's your responsibility to make sure everyone knows they're here for this.
Right.
He's not taking your job. He's not taking your job. He's here for this. That's often not the case. But if they are showing a pattern of it, then all right. Now,
Well, I feel like a lot of times managers have an easier time parting with somebody for a work performance issue that might be coachable versus a cultural issue, which is typically a lot more difficult to coach through.
it's squishy.
You know, and just seen so many times how somebody can destroy a company from the inside out just by being the opposite of the culture that's needed.
Well, what about a situation where maybe somebody's just not in the right fit? Like, what if you hire somebody for sales, but they'd be better in a people position?
And how do you know that?
And how do we go about figuring that out? Do we have
If you use
anything
a
for that?
database screening tool, you would typically know it before you hire. And I think that's one of the reasons I'd advocate for that is so you don't put somebody in an unfair position, right?
Yeah, then they're already not in a position.
But I think a good manager, a good leader sees the potential in someone and can pivot people.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Ideally.
I think
Ideally.
ideally.
How do you gain that, though? Is that something learned or something through experience? Is that wisdom? Like, how do you know you're the good leader?
I'll answer the first question first.
Sure.
And then we can think about the second one. But as a leader, you should, constantly be taking inventory of your team, right? Like if you have a relationship with them and you know them well, you're going to start to see their specific strengths and, of course, our weaknesses as well. And when we kind of talk about retention, why don't people stay at companies anymore? I think part of it is we don't have a good growth plan for those people.
Absolutely.
So it might not just be, hey, what's next for this person because I don't think they're well suited for this role, but also this person is well suited for this role. But what are they going to do in 3 years when they need a new role, right? And if it's not a promotion, what lateral move is going to be available? So,
And before you go into that next one, there is something on the 3 years. It's an
I was about to ask,
interesting.
is there a duration? Why 3 years?
There's an interesting. If you just watch patterns, think of your own life and think of patterns, right? Like we kind of have, high school's 4 years, right? College is 4 years.
Middle school's
So
3 years.
yeah. So think of getting through the first 3 years and then senior year, it's like it's a different year, right? Yeah. So that pattern, I believe, it continues when you get into work. So as 3 years comes up, you start looking for novelty.
Do you think that's all people or leadership? I would say at least in the Army, that's true. 3 years, they change different posts.
I didn't
but
even know that, but
that's
there you
definitely
go.
true. And there's a reason why they do 3 years, and there's a reason why there's another tidbit. You can only handle 3 to 5 tasks. So in squads, they actually have 3 to 5 people in a team or a squad, and then a platoon, which is larger, you have 3 to 5 or 4 squads in there. So, but
This is just my observation. This is what I've experienced. This is what I've seen.
right.
Well,
Right?
I'd have to totally agree with you. I'm coming up on 3 years
That's how it goes.
in my
That's how it goes,
current
yeah.
place, and at another place is 3 years. I mean, you're right; it's cyclical. But I don't, and I think to James's point, like if you are in a position where you're doing great, like things are going great or whatever, but you want more, I think your brain is like after 3 years, we'll start looking.
Yeah, you'll start looking for something.
Feelers will be out there
Yep.
that would never have been there had you been able to grow. To your
Internally.
point,
Yeah, I mean,
and exactly, you wouldn't have made a change because you're in a very good spot. You wouldn't change, but
anyone listening to this today should go back, look at their entire team, and look at how their tenure. And anyone that's been 3 years in a certain role, or not, they could be 16 years in an organization, but 3 years in the last same, 3 to 4, say,
how you doing?
I should check in with them. I bet you they're looking for something.
Right.
And it's what I've observed, and I started paying attention to it, and then I've started to kind of develop these little theories as to why. But, here we are, 4 of us here talking about this, and
Right.
we all are like, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it gets into silos as well and how how you break down organizational silos is by having a rotational system or, promotional system that brings people in from other areas within the organization.
Should we go into the ops
don't
and
know.
sales discussion?
Don't
Should we go there?
Don't we need to answer the second part of the question though?
Yeah,
How do you
go
know
ahead.
how do you know you're the good leader?
Look at James bringing the ship right
That's,
back
that's
around.
my
Bring it back.
personality. I'm
There
always
he
thinking
is.
about the thing. And
He was in the
finishing it.
army, but now he's the captain of the boat.
These guys are all over the place.
Captain of the boat.
That's a difficult question. I think that
That's why I asked it. I know.
somebody who's a good leader understands that there's a level of humility that goes along with just, being a human being and then being a leader as well. But I think you're a good leader when you can connect with your people and you deliver results.
But also to that point, you can be a leader and develop. I mean, you can be a non-leader. You can be entry-level person that ends up at some point being CEO of the company.
Yeah.
Because you were able to learn. Because that was one of your questions too. Like, can you? Is that learned or is that just you just have that knowledge? Like you have a magic wand to tell if that person's a good fit or whatever. I think that.
Yeah.
I think you could definitely. Yeah, I think it's 100% on.
Maxwell talks about this. I like his material.
John Maxwell,
Yeah,
right?
John Maxwell. He'll say there's a certain degree of natural leadership in people. And I think he's even said on 1 to 10, and somebody's more towards 1, somebody's more towards 10. But then I think he's even unpacked a little more, and I'd say in that, now we start getting back into your own story. What you've experienced, what's come against you, what you've had to overcome, and then areas that you have seen success that have helped build, your own leadership. So there is a piece of natural, but does that natural mean lived? Right? Who your parents were, how they communicated with each other, or lack thereof, and we go the opposite direction sometimes. Like, hey, I never want to be that, right?
Well, then you bring up a great point. I think there's a certain level of self-awareness that has to be in a leader. Like you have
Right.
to really know your emotions. You have to be aware of your background, your family of origin. These are things that I don't think a lot of people want to explore, or some people don't care to explore if they're looking just task-oriented.
It's hard.
Get the mission done, right?
It's hard, and it hurts.
Well, I think if you don't have that natural inclination towards leadership, you're not going to seek out that next step.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, that's another part of it. So it's a nature nurture thing, but it
There's a
really is. There has
seeking.
to be something there to want to drive. I mean, there has to be a reason why you want to take less pay and work harder.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's the truth.
So, we could ask ourselves, why do we want to be leaders? Like James, what drew you into it?
Leadership.
Yeah.
I would say when I entered West Point, I was 17 years old. So it wasn't necessarily because of leadership. I think it was because of reputation. And so my family of origin, or how I received love from my parents, looking back now, I didn't know this then,
Yeah.
subconsciously was performance-oriented validation, which basically means I have to do well in order to receive love. Get good grades, and then I would receive attention. So I think that's how I got into West Point. But in terms of West Point's, the process of getting you responsibility and making you in charge of something so that you're held accountable to the things that you're responsible for. That's their curriculum, that's their process. I think when I was a platoon leader in Iraq, and then you're responsible for people's lives, that's when you realize like, oh, this is not fake, this is not just training. Like when you feel the weight of your decisions and you know that people are counting on your decisions for you to do well, or their decisions are based on your decisions that are accurate, I think that's a part of learned leadership. But then also, as a leader, you can control, or you have more influence on not just the people, but the direction of where you think the organization should go. If you're a pawn on the chessboard, you kind of just move forward. But if you're the queen or the king, you can and you have an idea of what success looks like, you're going to want to be in that leadership position, right?
Yeah.
But I also, going back to Jocko, like there is a way to influence leadership down and up.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a person, it doesn't mean like, oh, that person above me just makes decisions. I just got to follow orders like a robot. You can actually be an asset to that leader by helping them understand where their decision may be right or wrong. And when you are able to provide new information, not being just a yes man, but say, hey, have you thought about this? There's a way to communicate without disrespecting somebody who may be your leader. And when you start being accurate and making good decisions, you build trust with the senior leader as well.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I think I found leadership is something that was just a natural fit, not just a natural fit, but a necessity in order to get the things done that I thought should have been done.
Yeah.
But it's the same for you guys. I mean, you guys are coming from more of the business background. When I came from the military background, you find that. Why did you guys become leaders? Why did you guys just make, 6 figures doing something else like a technician or something that would be fine? But
Yeah, I wanted it to be different.
you just want to be.
I didn't like it. I didn't like the traditional role of management. I didn't like the traditional role of how they looked at, what you were supposed to be as a manager. I didn't like it. And quite frankly, I said early on, there's no way it has to be like this. Like, it can't be this dysfunctional. People can't be this frustrated all the time with every decision that's being made. Like, why is the communication from, I'd say, 80% of the staff, and let's say a fairly large organization, all in line with each other, but out of line with senior leadership?
So you had bad leadership, is what made you say I can.
That's
do that.
absolutely it.
That was
You can be very inspirational.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So it was about, hey, we can do change. And it takes time.
Somewhat similar to some of the things you've seen.
Yeah, I mean, I've been. It's crazy because I don't want to say how old I am, but I've been a manager for over a quarter of a century. Like over 25 years of my life, I've been in management of some form or another. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. The way that do or die mentality that I grew up with, and the way most businesses are ran is a total joke. People are important. Like, they are assets, and they should be treated as such. You wouldn't just throw your money in the street. You got to take care of the things that take care of you.
Right.
And so I've always been just drawn to helping people be the best they can be. That's what I've always wanted to do. I know that as an individual contributor, I can do great things, but like as a manager, I can get 20, 30, 40, 50 people to do great things.
Yeah.
And to me, that makes a lot more, sense to me and like how I operate and how my brain works than sitting there and making sales every day or whatever, that kind of thing. And I know obviously I'm in a sales role here, but my growth is to get other people beneath me and not beneath me. You know what I mean? Under my supervision and
mentorship is a good thing.
Right. I love mentoring people. I love that whole aspect of it, whether it's coaching my daughter's volleyball or my son who plays, golf, and he's going to be going to college this year playing golf, and I've been his only coach. Like, those things to me, like building people to be better every day, that's my thing.
Yeah, a couple of what you're about to say, Sam. Well, real quick though, like, at West Point, we're talking about bad leadership, and one of the things they teach you is to learn from them, good or bad. Because when you even have bad leaders, you can learn from them and say, this is somewhere I don't want to be. This is something that's wrong.
You learn more from a bad leader than a good leader.
You really
a lot
do.
of time, if you're open to learning.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And not just wanting to stab, grab a knife and stab them. But you actually have to learn from those mistakes.
Right.
If you can actually take that information, like I was raised in a household where I had a lot of bad, information given to me, I could have went a totally different route.
Yeah.
But you have to recognize that, okay, that I don't want that. I want this over here.
Right.
And then that's
Well,
where the growth
you
potential comes.
either go down the road of complaining about it, or you do something about it.
Right. Or do the same and just repeat the cycle.
Yeah.
You brought something up also, Josh, about being part of a team, like a manager. You want to get more scaling, basically. One person can't do everything. You have to be part. Like, a manager can create more efficiencies and 5, 10x whatever the job may be. I think, stop being in SOAR Group, but being part of like this entrepreneurship part, you quickly realize. I mean, I always realize it, but you really realize how important the team is, because you just can't do everything by yourself. Just you have a specialty. You may be a subject matter expert on sales or marketing, but somebody's got operations. Somebody's got to do kind of that leadership visionary
People.
role. people role. It's just somebody has to be the technician. Somebody has to actually get the computer working. You know,
Yeah.
and so you just have to get these. You have to be part of this team. You know, and being part of the team means relationships.
So Garrett,
So
leadership
Leadership.
for you. Why do you know, what brought you to leadership and what made you want to thrive in this environment?
I think as a young person, my motive might not have always been as pure as it is now, we'll say, right?
Right.
So I think, and that's part of the interesting shift. You know, growing up, I was always fascinated with politics. I wanted to be a politician. And part of it might have just been, you know, we can kind of go into personality and psychological needs, but I have a need to influence. And some people might say a need to control. So I think my leadership journey has been learning to temper that. And, you know, naturally I might say I'm not an extrovert, I'm an introvert. So kind of switching my need to control to a need to become relational with people. And I think at this point, I've had the opportunity to see the change that occurs through good leadership. When you, in a work environment, can like change someone's family life, change someone's marriage.
It's amazing.
You know, it's like you can always be proud of the business turnarounds that you've done. But when you're like, man, like working with that person was able to make an impact on that person's life, like their family, that's to me now the greatest.
When there's where
Yeah.
your influence comes in, right? Like,
Yeah.
right. I mean, it helps your needs and it makes it a great, makes it great for them as well.
Correct.
It's awesome.
Gary, you mentioned needs, and we talk about nonviolent communication, but you also mentioned psychological needs. Is there a whole list of needs? There's nonviolent communication, but is there other? How do you? Couple things, right? I guess a couple questions. What are those needs? Is the list all encompassing, and how do you learn what somebody's needs are?
And I definitely like Marshall Rosenberg's list, right, in nonviolent communication. So I think that's a great start. There's a few different tools out there that people use, right? A lot of people like DISC. Some people like predictive index. Been learning the process communication model. So there's lots of different models out there, and each one kind of will have their view of people's needs that are all very similar and can be related. So I think it's a matter of which one you use, right? I think we've kind of experienced them all at this point, and they all are great to have. So.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I mean, people prefer one over the other. I have some preference, but I've found that understanding more than one. I mean, there's also, there's the Enneagram, and then there's Clifton Strengths.
Right.
I think Clifton Strengths are great because you start understanding that's where it kind of pulls in some self-awareness. So you couple that with understanding some other pieces of who you are. And listen, we're nobody is on a sheet of paper. There is, everyone is very, that's one thing.
At least we hope not.
Everyone is very unique.
Right.
Every person, I mean, to our fingerprint, our fingerprint is no two are the same. So it's the same across the board. So can everyone be managed the same? No. So that's why it comes back to you have to know.
And just doing it with basic needs is it sounds really simple, and it really is, but so many people never even think about it.
Yeah.
Like if you think about, okay, they need food, shelter, like the extreme basic needs of being a human being, like you can affect huge change if you make sure that those things are taken care of.
If during the Industrial Revolution, if we had thought about people's needs, what would the world look like today?
Right.
I mean, it would have been a vastly different. The whole labor management struggle would have looked very different.
Yeah.
I'm convinced.
Yeah, I remember Garrett sharing me the first time you guys went to a new company. One of the basic things you did for people was just give them clean water. Wasn't that? They didn't have like clean.
Hard to believe in
refrigerator.
today's age. Like, how could people not have
Clean drinking
access to regular good drinking water, right? And
This is America we're talking about. Like
this is America.
We're not talking like
Yeah.
third
No,
world
it's-
country here.
You wouldn't think so, but yeah,
It's crazy.
we're talking about America.
Well, I'm going to do something here because I know we can sit here and talk for hours and hours. We're all passionate about this. and
Yeah, at a
that's-
certain point, people probably just
that's why
turn it
we're here.
off, right?
Well, I don't think so. I
Okay,
don't think. I
well.
hope not. Hey, don't Don't listen to this guy. But real quick,
Don't
what I
listen to
want to
that.
do
Just-
to wrap this up a little bit and kind of put a bow
Yeah, there's
on
good
it,
stuff coming.
I want to talk about the Serenity Now podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, why are we doing this? Like, why are we doing the Serenity Now podcast? So, why are we doing this podcast for people? Don't all talk at
Yeah.
once.
I mean,
Don't interrupt.
first and foremost, I think it's just a forum to address, the current events in the world and bring people on who have been successful in leadership positions and positions of change. And I think those are interesting stories that need to be told.
Yeah, I think we also want to bring on some people that, we're going to have a wide list of people that come on, and from people you've maybe heard of to some people you've never heard of, and maybe even, some people that work the front line, and it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Right? Let's hear from them. Like, what is, there's a lot of discussion on what's going on in today's labor environment and today's working world, retention, the great resignation.
Twice. There was
yeah.
2 parts to that.
Yeah,
It was
wasn't it?
October and then also April.
So, let's hear from some people.
Yeah.
Right? Is that going to be interesting to you? Yeah, maybe some. A lot of people, depending. And
There's a lot that goes into that retention piece, right? So
Right.
if we're talking about health and welfare and nutrition,
Yep.
right? All these things tie in. So it's all fair game for Serenity Now.
yeah, and I think it's just also it's us communicating that we're open to hearing what's going on. We're hearing from other people, hearing other views.
And I also think, a really cool thing about this is that we're going to, dive deeper into each of you guys and me, I'm hoping as well. And
Not you, Josh. No, we're not interested.
I'm an open book. It's easy. You don't need no deep dive there. But, I know we have some hot topics that we want to talk about. Like as things pop in our head, I'm sure we'll talk about them.
Yeah.
Like nutrition, we are very passionate.
Yep.
I mean, one of the first things I was told by these guys when I first started talking to them was that we're going to have, gym memberships for all of our employees, like health and like, it's not just health, like, cause health is a bogus term, right?
Yeah.
But actual wellness and actually taking care
Yeah.
of somebody, like
Yeah.
actual from their very core all the way up. That's an important thing. So I think we'll have lots of discussion about nutrition. We'll have, discussions about different ways to do work.
Yeah, I really want to share on that like nutrition and wellness piece, something that I'd like to share with organizations that I think if companies adopted this, they would see exponential improvements in efficiency and productivity.
Yeah, not just productivity, retention, right?
Yeah.
Well, and retention,
I mean,
across the board.
if
But-
people actually gave a crap about the people that work for them and on a whole,
yeah, you could actually still not
Yeah.
give a crap and do a couple of things.
Right, still
that
help
would
them.
help.
right.
So, if you want to stay there, which I don't advise it, but if you need to,
Yeah.
Hey, sometimes it's the first step.
you're right.
Yeah, and I want to share my thoughts on where the podcast can go. I think all fundamentally, we all know there's something wrong in the world. There's something broken here. We talk about just politics or just in schools or what's going on just at the home. And I think we want to approach this as, can there be change? Mm-hmm. What can you do to change as a person, as a leader? And what are the things where maybe it's something that's not your responsibility? Because you don't want to overburden yourself. Only one person or a team can only do so much. And helping you to have like this wisdom to decide, can you do something? Or is there something that's best to let go? But also part of that is to initiate change. And change costs something.
Yeah.
It costs sacrifice. It causes pressure and challenges. And looking at these things, it's not as a negative, but an opportunity to grow. And can we find these nuggets and stories, not just in amongst ourselves, but in people starting businesses, people who are already in leadership positions, like in healthcare, wherever it may be, or in different countries, wherever it may be, I think we're searching for those things. And can those things be distilled and crystallized into principles that we can apply for ourselves or yourself, not just to your organization, but to your family and your community? Mm-hmm. So that's how I see Serenity. And that's kind of the definition, I feel like, the idea of serenity, but also a foundation and a spark to do something.
Yeah.
That was very well said, James.
Thanks.
Very well. The president has spoken.
President Day.
That's it.
All right, so here we are.
Awesome.
Yeah.
the ship
Yeah.
is on its way. The
I'm
captain,
The captain
slash
is-
president has we're on our way
Well-
and onward and upward, right?
Yes.
Well, we said we burning the ship, so am I captain of a burn ship or am I captain of a...
You're on land now.
Okay,
So
all
you
right,
should
okay,
be good
that's
because
how
you're
it works.
army, so you'll be fine.
That's all right.
All right. So until
Awesome.
next time.
Very excited.
Yeah.
Serenity now.
Josh,
Serenity
thank you.
now.
Serenity now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right,
Thanks.
guys.
Cheers.